Watch this. A glitchy loading sequence. A grid pulses. And then, boom, a honeycomb shatters away, revealing the UI. This is a GSAP-powered preloader animation for a website that looks like a techie intro. Let's break it down step by step. We are going to use GSAP and SVG along with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, of course. Let's start with the HTML. We've got 3 key elements. Grid background, our animated grid backdrop. Glow layer, floating hex glows that will react to the mouse. Preloader, the loading text element that flickers while the page loads. And finally, a section with a title, description, and buttons. This is the content we'll reveal after the animation finishes. To explain the SVG part, the SVG is placed directly within the reveal section, and it spans the full screen. It contains a mask with an ID of honeycomb mask, which is used to hide or reveal parts of the section. The actual animated hexagons are added into the G tag with JavaScript and applied to a rect element that covers the entire viewport. Now let's see if we have covered everything in HTML by looking at this browser that is the slowest, most annoying in my opinion. Let me explain the entire CSS in one go so you guys can focus on the code afterwards. Now let's talk about the styling that brings the futuristic vibe to life. We've broken it down into a few main layers. Background grid layer sits behind everything. It's made with 2 overlapping linear gradients, one vertical and one horizontal, spaced every 50 pixels to create a perfect square grid. We then animate it using keyframes move grid, slowly shifting the background position diagonally over time. Next up is the glow layer. It's an absolutely positioned container where we inject glowing hex shapes. Each glow hex uses clip path to create a hexagon, then a radial gradient to give it a soft inner glow. We also use filter blur and set lower opacity to make it feel more like ambient energy in the background. Loading text is the flickering terminal style text you see during loading. It's centered with transform and styled with a muted gray color. The flicker animation is done with a simple keyframes flicker, cycling between full opacity and slightly faded, repeating every 2 seconds, just enough to catch your eye without being distracting. Although you can change the flickering seconds as you please. Main reveal section or reveal section is the actual content we want to show after the preloader finishes. We set it to fill the screen, align everything center both vertically and horizontally using Flexbox, and keep it hidden initially with opacity 0 and a slight downward translate with 20 pixels. That way, when we animate it in with GSAP, it has a smooth upward slide and fade effect. The mask SVG sits on top of everything but has opacity 0 by default. We'll animate this with GSAP to briefly show it during the hexagon reveal sequence. It covers the entire screen and allows us to apply the honeycomb mask effect dynamically via JavaScript. Finally, we have two glowing buttons at the bottom. The primary one uses a pink-to-pink gradient, glowing box shadows, and scales up slightly on hover. The secondary one is outlined, transparent, but also glows when hovered. Together, they complete that UI look, polished, glowy, and interactive. Let's break down exactly how the JavaScript powers this animation using GSAP. We start by simulating a loading sequence. There's an array of loading messages, like what we are writing right now. These are cycled through every second using set interval, updating the loading text in the center of the screen. After 6 seconds, we clear the interval to stop the messages, fade out the preloader by lowering its opacity, then fully remove it from the DOM using remove. Once that's done, we trigger our main reveal animation by calling start honeycomb animation. Inside that function, we dynamically generate the honeycomb hexes. We use SVG polygon elements and calculate the 6 points of each hex with the helper function getHexPoints. This math loops over 6 angles, every 60 degrees, and returns a string of x, y coordinates. It's repeated across columns and rows to fill the mask grid. The results are injected into the hex group inside the SVG. For glow animation in the background, on mouse move, we get the cursor's position and normalize it to center the values. Then, each glowing hex shifts based on its index, creating a smooth parallax effect using GSAP 2. Next, we build a GSAP timeline to control the entire reveal sequence in perfect order. First, we fade out the loading text in just 1/4 of a second using opacity 0 and an easing function. Once that's done, we hide it completely with display none, and immediately show the SVG mask by setting its opacity to 1. Then, we instantly make all the SVG hexes fully visible and scaled to 1, so they're ready for animation. Now here's the cool part. We animate each hex to scale down to 0 and fade out, one by one, from left to right. This creates a collapsing honeycomb transition using staggered animation, controlled by GSAP's stagger setting. Once the hexes vanish, we fade out the entire SVG mask with a quick 0.2 seconds transition. Right after that, we bring in the main content section. It fades in and slides upwards smoothly, giving it a subtle entrance. And finally, the glow layer fades in, activating those floating hexagons in the background that now respond to the user's mouse. I think I made a mistake with the glow layer because there is no glowing stuff in the background that moves with my mouse movement. Oh, I put a dot before the glow hex. Please remove it for your own sake. Now let's see if it works or not. I hope you guys also noticed the grid lines moving. I made them more clearer in code for you to see. Here's the final version of the preloader, slightly tweaked for better visuals, but with the same animations. And hey, I didn't bug you with subscribe requests earlier, so if you're enjoying this, hit that subscribe button, it's free. If you have been dealing with my dead humor for 23 minutes straight then,